Hello, the co-creative destiny weavers. Here, I like to follow into this habit of reading wise stories, always on a Friday, which stands in the co-creative destiny weaving group for blooming. And Friday is also connected to the goddess Freya, who's also a fate spinner and bringing freedom and blooming, spreading our wings. I love to read wise story. It's airy, fairy, flowery, like I like to call myself, on the YouTube channel, where I've got a collection with many different fairy tales and stories. You're welcome to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I continue today to follow my intuition and read a story which is called The Third Continent by Lucien Heidens Körner, from this book, translated The Colors of Reality. And I've already contacted this publishing house, which exists since end of 80s, for the third time via mail, because there is no email, no phone number available to connect with them, to ask for the permission to translate those beautiful stories into English, but I still haven't heard from them. So if any of you has got any advice, any idea how else is it possible to connect with them, I continue to just do it like this, to spontaneously translate it into English, with the reference, of course, where the source comes from. So let's start. It's a story about the third continent of being. So once upon a time, a long, long time ago, there were two continents on this earth, and they were close to each other. And on both continents, there were people, and they were very different to each other. One continent was called giving, and the other one was called taking. And there was also a legend going around that there was another third continent as well, and that it was actually the source of all humanity, a continent of being. But since it was such a long time ago, people were not sure whether it was the truth or not. And they were thinking that it was just a fairy tale. The same like today, we also forgot about the two continents of giving and taking. And we also think that is just a story or a fairy tale. And on the continent of taking, three girls were living. And they were talking a lot of times about the continent of being, and were dreaming to go there one day. And since they were growing older, one day they really decided to now go on this adventure to find the third continent of being, and to also go and stop at the second continent of giving. Everybody on this continent were considering those three girls being totally crazy. How could they imagine to find something better as what they've already been having? Taking everything, to always just thinking about their success and how to be better than everybody else. And the three girls, who were called Eva, Shulamit and Lilith, they decided that they also followed the same principles from the continent that they came from. They wanted to take their dreams to the fulfillment of the dreams. And so decided to go on this adventure to find the continent being and to also experience the continent of taking, not of giving. And after going on this adventure for many, many days or months, we don't know, they finally arrived on this continent of giving. And they have observed a completely different life compared to their continent where they come from of taking. They've seen that everybody was just giving, and were just friendly and tried to just accommodate all the others. And I thought, this is strange. They must be stupid, those people, because it was so uncommon from their continent of taking. So even though the three girls were amazed about the people, how they were so generously just giving, after a while they realized that those people were also not really happy. They observed that even though everybody on the continent of giving was giving everything away, they were very unhappy to receive things and just weren't able to do so. And everybody, of course, was expecting from the three girls to give as well, but they never learned it. They only ever learned to take. So after a while, there was also a lot of discrepancy and bad feelings between the people and the three girls. And so decided to continue on the journey to find the third continent of being. Of course, everybody on the continent of giving was also considering the three girls as being totally crazy. And still, nevertheless, they took off and continued on their journey. And they did actually arrive on the third continent of being. We don't know how long it took, but the most important thing, they arrived there. The people, they were surprised because nobody has ever come to visit them. And the people on the third continent of being seemed to be totally normal. There was nothing really to tell about them, but they appeared to be really happy and just being. And it was not about like taking or giving. Somebody, if they felt like taking loads, they took loads, or they've been giving loads. It was just a natural cycle of taking and giving, which showed the girls a totally new way of being. And they learned to be really happy, very balanced. They were just really simply living. They were observing the beauty around them and were just really fulfilled and happy. The grace would not be talked to death. and the harmony of nature was not destroyed. And to summarize it in just a few little words, that was the paradise on earth. So Eva, Shulamit and Lilith, they stayed there for a very long time and were just simply happy. Only after many, many years, they started to remember where they come from and started to feel a little bit of sadness and wanted to go back and return and tell the other people where they come from, that the third continent of being was not just a dream, and that everybody could live like that. And so they decided to return back. And on their journey back, they stopped on the second continent of giving, and they realized that their visit has left a lot of impact, because especially the young people started to be revolting and wanting something different. They realized that only giving was not enough, and that they also wanted to have this a gift of receiving and taking. And so there were like two camps, like the elder people and the young people, starting to fight between the old traditional way of just giving and the youngers who also wanted to receive and take. And they were so preoccupied between the fighting between those different traditions that they were not really listening about the stories about the continent of being. And thus Lilith decided to stay there on the second continent of giving and to teach the people there about another way, instead of fighting between giving and taking and just being. And Eva continued alone on her trip to the first continent of taking, where they originally come from. And once she arrived there, the circumstances were not better than on the second continent of taking. There also, there was a divide between the young people and the elderly, fighting about what is right and wrong. And even though Eva was telling a lot of beautiful stories about the continent of being, that actually just added the fire into this different traditional opinions. And the youngsters and the elders started to blame even the second continent of giving, that brought back, that was their fault, that now the young people wanted to also give or not just take. And so there was another war between the youngsters and the elders. And both continents, after many years of war, started to blame the three girls. That was their stories about the third continent and also about the other continent, which brought this fighting between each other. And so they decided that it was actually the third continent of being which brought all this harmony. And so they decided to go to this third continent and to lead the war against them. to eradicate the third continent, and so that they can return back to the normal ways of giving and taking. And the third continent, because they never expected anyone to attack them, were not prepared for it. And they only ever knew a paradise and peace. And so it was not difficult to eradicate all the people from the third continent of being. So happy the soldiers from the first and second continent, they just left, and they considered the war was won, and that it would all come back to normal. And so it happened that some volcanoes, catastrophes, also took its toll on the two remaining continents of giving and taking, and that also those both continents started to break apart and to divide themselves in many different parts. And still, very, very few people who survived remembered how they were greeted when they came to the third continent of being, and how they were greeted with love and peace and harmony. And those very few people continued to travel around those different separated parts and telling about this very distant memory, which became a legend, that there is a paradise on this human earth and how we can live simply by being. And they continue to plant this seed of love in the hearts of other people. But on the whole, the life continued for those different people, separated all those different parts around the world. And they consider it just being a legend or like a fairy tale which never existed. But deep in their hearts, this longing of simply being and just being surrounded by love and living in a paradise, and that it just disappeared. This longing still remained in the hearts of people. And one main question remains: do the people really know that they are all from this continent of being, and then they all carry love in their hearts? I think this is such a beautiful story for the current times when people try to envision the future and a new earth. And in this group of co-creative destiny weaving, it's also an important question for us. How do we want to weave the new story, the new earth, based on love and simply being ourselves? I'd love to hear your views or comments. And yeah, just wishing you many blessings on your seat inside of your gold, which you all carry inside. Many blessings. Blagadaru.